When my daughter Emma was 7, we had very interesting Bible studies within our home. I would do puppet show Bible studies with her. So I would have a story in mind, and based on that story, I would go tell her to choose any number of stuffed animals of hers that could participate. So she would carefully choose the stuffed animals that had the privilege to participate in Bible study for that night. Now from there, certain of those stuffed animals would be good, and typically the shark would be the bad guy. So the good thing about doing this Bible study in this way with her is it engaged her, it gave her ownership, and it really kind of met her on a level that she was at as a 7-year-old. Well, now she's 15. Can you imagine if when it was time for Bible study, if I said, okay, go get your stuffed animals, like how do you think that would go over? Probably not very good, right? Instead, now we are reading a book together and we've already read a chapter, and so we already read that chapter and it's time to discuss it, right? So the reality is that the way I loved her at 7 is much different than the way that I love her at 15. Now, certainly the heart behind it is the same, but the method looks much different. In our passage today, we in essence are seeing Paul echo this same theme, right? Paul is motivated by love to win as many people as possible. And so he's going to tell us he becomes all things to all people that he might win them. So let's dive into 1 Corinthians 9:19 through 23. Though I am free and belong to no one, I have made myself a slave to everyone to win as many as possible. To the Jews I became like a Jew to win the Jews. To those under the law I became like one under the law, though I myself am not under the law, so as to win those under the law. To those not having the law I became like one not having the law, though I am not free from God's law, but under Christ's law, so as to win those having the law. To the weak I became weak, to win the weak. I become all things to all people, so that by all possible means I might save some. I do all this for the sake of the gospel, that I may share in its blessings. Now, notice how Paul starts off this section, and as a result, notice the connection in chapters 8 and 9. He says, though I am free and belong to no one, I have made myself a slave to everyone to win as many people as possible. So these chapters really center on the theme of how are we going to handle our freedom as Christians? And Paul's answer to this question is to use our freedom to become a servant in order to win as many people as possible. In other words, he will gladly give up certain freedoms and rights that are his in order to be an effective, winsome witness for Christ. So what about us? Do we use our freedom in order to become someone else's servant? Right? The prevailing mindset in Corinth was, how can I flaunt my freedom? Whereas the prevailing view of Paul was, how can I sacrifice my freedom in order to win them? Now, becoming all things to all people doesn't mean we compromise biblical principles. It means that we labor from a place of love and within the framework of Scripture to meet people where they are at. Right? In other words, like, what is common ground that we have? Where can I identify with them? Paul's approach to sharing the gospel was vastly different depending upon who his audience was. Right? That doesn't mean he watered it down or compromised, but it does mean his approach matched his audience. So, in other words, I'm not going to talk with someone who has no biblical reference the same way I would with someone who grew up in church. So we learn from Paul that we must not assert our freedom at the cost of being unloving. And so whether we do puppet show Bible studies or we're reading real books, we do so in order to become all things to all people. And so I want to leave you with this question. Who is someone in your life that you may need to change your approach to in order to love them well?